Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 153 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is going on?
What's happening, man?
I'm doing great.
Do you like how I changed that up?
I do like how you changed that up. I also like how you brought back your customized Yeti that I bought you.
I do. It's right here.
My wife and I both were on the side that no way Gibby brings it back. I didn't understand why you took it in the first place, but...
Ye that has little faith in I. Or whatever the saying is.
I don't think that's it, but let's go with it just so we can propel the podcast forward.
Yeah.
All right, buddy, we have some new Patreon supporters. Let's give our shout outs. We had Lucy Burton.
What's up, Lucy?
Amanda Morrill.
Hey, Amanda.
Igali Julia Singe.
Hey, what's up, Singe?
Karen Hudson.
Hey, Karen.
Jasmine Love.
Hey, love.
Santa Rain.
What's going on, Santa?
Kristen Estrada.
Hey, Kristen.
Chelsea Cardokas.
What's going on, Chelsea?
Bobby Burrell.
Hey, thanks, Bobby Burrell.
Lori Anderson.
What's going on, Lori?
Josh Reyes.
Hey, Josh.
Oneida Charrett.
Hey, Oneida.
Ryan Mundy.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thomas Peroni.
Hey, Thomas.
Gabriella Osorio.
Ooh, Gabriella.
Stian Smebby Norman.
What's up, SSNC? Huh?
Stacey Ransom.
Hey, Stacy.
Precious Benjamin.
Oh, you're precious.
Katie.
What's going on, Katie?
Deborah Ulian.
Hey, Deborah.
And Alexandra Stanley.
Hey, Alexandra.
So a couple of names there that I'm pretty sure I completely whiffed on.
Yeah, you did. I just let you kind of roll.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah.
It's very appreciative.
Yeah, got you back.
Gibbs, let's go back into the vault. This week, we selected Angela Rhodes.
Hey, Angela.
Been with us a long time. We appreciate all the Patreon support we get. The new support and the continued support. Really goes a long way towards helping you and I continue to put out this podcast.
Yeah.
We had some great PayPal donations as well. Ken Gretsch.
Hey, Ken.
Daisy Davies.
Oh, look at that. There's Daisy. Talked to her on the internet before.
Kathy Snyder.
The internet.
The internet.
Hey,
you
Kathy.
Sounded like you were your age. Right then
right
and there.
there. It's out.
Did you hear me say Kathy Snyder?
I did. Hey, Kathy.
And Heather Allen.
What's going on, Heather?
The only thing worse than that would have been if you would have said the interwebs. You ever hear somebody say that?
The interwebs.
The interwebs.
Yeah.
So Gibbs, right now we have a lot out in the TCAT multiverse.
We do.
I'll call it. We have a True Crime All the Time episode out right now on Travis Baumgartner. So going back to Canada, this is a young guy who runs into some financial problems.
Right.
He's got a job at one of those armored truck services and figures, you know what? I'll solve all my problems.
Yeah, I have a solution. I know what I'll do.
The problem is it involves murdering a number of people, colleagues, and then stealing an armored truck, and then everything goes from there.
Right.
But it's a good episode. Make sure you check that out. We also have a brand new Patreon only episode.
And another good one there too.
So Joseph Corcoran, we're in Indiana. This is a guy that as a kid was accused of killing his parents.
Yeah.
Got off. And then about 5 years later committed some murders that also involved some family members. Both very interesting cases. So again, if you're not a Patreon member, this is at least our 20th Patreon episode, full-blown episodes that you can't hear anywhere else. The newer ones are on audio and video. So it's a great time to sign up.
Get them either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
Yeah, I'm ready.
We're talking about the unsolved murder of Holly Staker that occurred in 1992 in the city of Waukegan, Illinois. Holly Ray Staker was born on January 13th, 1981 in Lake County, Illinois, to Michael Staker and Karen Nancy Kalinowski. Holly had a twin sister named Heather, and they also had a younger sister and an older brother. So pretty full family.
Yeah, I would say so.
And as twins, Gibbs, and this happens quite a bit, right? Holly and Heather, they dressed alike. They did their hair up the same way. They were matchies.
Kind of like you and I.
Sure.
Yeah.
A lot of people have called us the True Crime Podcast Twins.
Sure. In a strange, bizarre way.
I have to wear my toupee to really pull it off.
Yeah, and I have to wear lifts to make sure I'm a little bit taller.
Yeah, exactly. Holly and Heather were extremely cute little girls. But, Gibbs, many people have pointed out, they had the appearance of being much older than what their age actually was. They were, in 1992, 11 years old.
Yeah.
Both girls were cheerleaders. They did very well in school. In the summer of 1992, the kids were still enjoying their summer. They had just a few more weeks before they had to start school as sixth graders at North Elementary School. Holly made friends very easily, and both girls did odd jobs, side jobs to make money, like babysitting, to help bring in cash for the family.
Yeah, it was pretty nice that they helped contribute, to the family budget.
I think it's very nice for an 11-year-old. I don't remember either of my girls at the age of 11 saying, "Here, Dad, we would like to contribute to the family budget."
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Can we help pay for the groceries, Dad?
I don't remember that ever happening. It really, the only time that the twins were apart was when they were working these odd jobs, babysitting at different houses. Holly and Heather would not be together on August 17th, 1992. That day, Holly was babysitting for the Engelbrecht family, and she had babysat for them before. The mom of that family needed someone to watch her 5-year-old boy and 2-year-old girl, and Holly was perfect for the job. She was great.
The kids loved her. She was one of those babysitters that the kids hate to see the mom come home because they didn't want the babysitter to go. They were having so much fun with her. They just wanted the babysitter to stay.
Yeah, because Holly would play games with them. And, really, as a babysitter, you're giving all of your attention, right? Moms can't do that all the time.
No, they're busy.
But a babysitter can do that for 2, 3, 4 hours or however long the gig is. Holly arrived at the Engelbrecht apartment located at 442 Hickory at 4 p.m. on the 17th. This was only about 3 blocks from her home. This was a 2-unit, 2-story apartment with a flat roof. The Engelbrecht family lived on the 2nd floor. The mom greeted Holly and then left to go to work at John's Cheer Tavern just up the road. She was a bartender there. And like you said, Gibbs, the kids were extremely excited to see Holly. They had ordered pizza for dinner. After eating, the oldest child, the 5-year-old boy, went out to the front yard to play with some neighbor boys.
A normal night, right? Eat some pizza, go have some fun.
Around 8 p.m., this little 5-year-old boy was still outside, and that caught the attention of a woman who was a neighbor of the Engelbrechts. I think she was a little concerned. We are talking about a 5-year-old boy.
It's kind of young to be out in the front yard of a neighborhood for that long a period of time with no parent.
And I think especially as you get into 8 o'clock, right? Probably not dark yet because of the time of the year, but you're getting there.
Sun's coming down.
So the neighbor approached the little boy and asked him why he was still outside. And he told her that the door to his apartment was locked and his babysitter wouldn't open the door. The neighbor tried the door, knocked several times, and she couldn't get a response either. This neighbor knew that the mom worked at the tavern down the road, so she scooped up the 5-year-old and took him down to the tavern. I think she was alarmed and had a right to be alarmed. Once they got to the tavern, she told the mom that she couldn't get anyone to answer the door. So the mom pretty quickly called the apartment several times, hoping that Holly would pick up the phone, but she didn't.
Which would be alarming, right? Because you're like, where's my babysitter?
And where's my 2-year-old?
Yeah.
So she next called Holly's mom, and both women agreed to meet at the apartment right away. They arrived at the apartment and went inside And what they saw first was the little 2-year-old Engelbrecht girl playing in the middle of the family room.
Which had to be relief for her mom.
Sure. She's okay.
Yeah. Ooh, man, there she is.
She's playing. I've got my 5-year-old. I've got my 2-year-old.
Right.
They're both safe. They called out for Holly. No response. And Gibbs, I don't think Holly's mom wasted any time. She jumped into action thinking something's not right.
Right.
Holly wouldn't do this. She obviously wouldn't just leave these kids and go somewhere.
She's not answering. I'm calling out her name. I'm walking around the apartment. I don't see her. Something's wrong.
Yeah, she's missing. And so Holly's mom called the police. While they were waiting for police to show up, they began another search of the apartment. And that's when they found Holly shoved behind a bedroom door. Gibbs, this was a horrific discovery. Holly's dead body was partially clothed. She had nothing on from the waist down. She was covered in blood from head to toe. I think it was apparent. She had been cut. She had been stabbed a number of times. The police got on scene around 8:30 p.m. and they secured the site. They called in the coroner to come get Holly's body. The Waukegan police called in the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force to assist with their investigation.
Well, this task force just had more experience with this type of crime.
Yeah, and I have said this before. I give a lot of credit to agencies who are willing to call in other people because they know their limitations. Not that they can't do it, but there's someone out there who has more experience, which means they're probably better at it. They've done it more often. As police were doing their investigation, they combed through the apartment. They quickly determined that the point of entry for the suspect was the rear door. This was a wooden door that someone had kicked in to gain access to the apartment. Not hard usually to figure out when a door has been forcefully kicked in.
Absolutely. Especially if it's a wood door, you'll see that splintering.
The police found a bloody knife in the backyard that they initially thought to be the murder weapon. In a press conference later, police would make the comment that the area where Holly was murdered had been declining. Drugs and theft had been on the rise, and really just crimes in general had ramped up in this area in recent years. The very next day, the coroner reported that Holly had been sexually assaulted, and he was able to take DNA from her vaginal and anal areas. The coroner also reported that Holly had been strangled, but that was not her cause of death. The coroner reported that Holly died from over 27 stab wounds and slashes to her body. And some of these, they're grisly. She had been stabbed in her lungs, her heart, her abdomen. Holly also had a number of defensive wounds on her arms and hands.
Can you imagine what that had to be like? 11 years old, 27 times. And that the time that was happening, she was putting her hands and arms out in front of her just to try to make it stop.
Yeah, because the coroner reported that this 11-year-old girl, Holly, she put up a tremendous fight. I think, as you pointed out, as evidenced by the number of these defensive wounds. The police searched the neighborhood for clues. They were looking for, witness accounts. Just 3 days after Holly's murder, the police had a person of interest. This was a man that lived near the apartment, the Engelbrecht's apartment where Holly was babysitting.
Well, he had scratches on his face, scratches on his arms, so kind of promising.
Well, he also had a black eye.
Yeah.
So now you can get those type of wounds a number of different ways. You could be in an altercation, a street fight, but if you're looking for someone that has attacked, sexually assaulted, and murdered a young girl who police know put up a hell of a fight, somebody with a bunch of scratches on them is going to pique their interest. No doubt about it. But Gibbs, we mentioned that police found a knife that they believed to be the murder weapon. They were able to lift some fingerprints from this knife. And so they had something to compare against persons of interest, possible suspects, when they compared the fingerprints of this man with the scratches to the fingerprints found on the knife. Wasn't a match. So they determined that this guy was not a suspect. They removed him from the list. But police were getting dozens and dozens of leads every day. It was reported that in 1 week, they received over 500 leads. That is a lot of leads to work.
Yeah, I think they worked at least half of them within the first week,
which I would say is pretty good. I don't know how many people they have working on this case, but that's a lot of leads in 1 week to try to follow up on.
But it's important, right? I mean, important on any level, but this is an 11-year-old girl that was brutally murdered. And I think you want to try to figure out who did this and why, for the parents, for the family, but also for the community.
Well, and that's the angle I was going to hit on. I mean, every murder, police want to solve every murder, but let's be honest. There are some murders that rile up and scare the community more than others.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the murder of a child, that scares the you-know-what out of everyone. Now, if you have a drug deal shootout.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, people are scared. It's not that whoever's life that was is not important. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it's not going to tug at the heartstrings or scare people about their own children the way that the murder of Holly would have.
Right. And if you think about it, this is 1992, people in this area, they just got over the whole Gacy thing, right? So it's in the back of their mind, how bad people can be. And I'm sure it's kind of lingering, there's something that people don't forget.
Yeah. And to that point, in researching Holly's case, as you're looking through old newspapers and things like that, Gacy popped up a lot. There were huge articles on his appeals. A lot of things were still taking place at the time they were searching for Holly's killer.
Yeah.
At the end of the first week, Holly's family held a press conference, and they wanted to thank the community for the tremendous amount of support they received and the efforts that police were putting into their daughter's case. They asked the community to keep sending any leads to the police, and they offered up a $1,000 reward for the information that led to the arrest of the murderer of their daughter. It was during this press conference that a local businessman told the community that a memorial fund had been set up for Holly and the family. They wanted to raise enough money to pay for Holly's funeral services and to allow the family to move from their current home to a new home.
And I think the reason they wanted to move was they all were having a tough time, but Heather, the twin sister, was really having a hard time being in their current home with all the memories that were around her all the time about her sister who was no longer there.
Well, you think about however long they had been in that home, they had shared a lot of memories.
Yeah.
And twins are a little different, right? We know that.
Absolutely.
I mean, they have a different type of bond than most siblings. It had to have hit her extremely hard.
I actually read that at one point, Heather, because of that twin sister bond, was so scared that whoever did this was not done, that they would want to find her and do the same to her to complete the process. Like it was a pair, like whoever did this wanted to make sure both of them received the same thing.
Well, and I get that. Sometimes, these twins, they feel like, yeah, they know they're two different people, but they feel like they're so connected.
Yeah.
2 weeks went by after Holly's murder, still no arrest of a suspect. The neighbors began to get restless. And, as we talked about, concerns grew. This killer's still out there. who's going to be next? Are they going to come after my child? Is another child going to be killed? And not just children. The community looked at it as if, if this type of person could kill an 11-year-old, they could kill anyone.
Sure.
They're heartless. They have no feelings. They put no real value on human life.
None whatsoever.
So the neighbors decided to put together a neighborhood watch program to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. About a month after Holly's murder, the city held a march to honor Holly and really all the victims of sexual assault that occurred in their city. Holly's family buried her at the Warren Cemetery in Lake County, Illinois. A few weeks later, on September 29th, 1992, police learned about a person of interest from a prison inmate. And Gibbs, this was an inmate that wanted to strike a deal.
Imagine that.
We've heard that quite a bit.
We hear it a lot, yes.
In cases over the years. He wanted to make a deal to reduce his charges, and in return, he would disclose key information about the murder of Holly Staker. The inmate said that another inmate by the name of Juan Rivera, who was 19 years old, mentioned to him that he was at a party next to the apartment where Holly was murdered. Rivera said that at the party, he noticed a man acting very suspiciously. But Gibbs police heard about Juan Rivera from another source, and it was from the Engelbrecht mother.
Yeah, while she was standing outside of the apartment while the police was inside doing their investigation, crowds kind of formed, and he actually walked up to her and asked her, what's going on? What happened inside the apartment?
At the time police learned about Rivera, he was out on bond, awaiting trial on an arrest for robbery charges. So Gibbs, they knew where he was. It wasn't too hard to find him to go pick him up for questioning.
Yeah, easy, right? This is where he should be.
I think when you're in the world of police investigation, that's one of the easier wins you get.
You're like, I think I can handle this one, guys.
Yeah, there's not a lot of searching. So they did pick him up for questioning, and police were able to convince him to give blood samples and hair samples for testing. During questioning, Rivera mentioned to investigators that he was near the apartment where Holly was murdered that night, attending a party. He also told them to look into a guy named Robert Hurley because Rivera said Hurley left the party for a while, but then later returned. He was all sweaty, he was out of breath, and he had what appeared to be fresh scratches on him. But here's where investigators ran into a problem. They tried to corroborate Rivera's story. They started talking to, people around the neighborhood.
Right.
They found out there was no party.
Nothing happened that night.
Where he said there was. And when they questioned him about it, he admitted to them he lied. But he maintained that he had nothing to do with Holly's death.
Then it makes you wonder, why even tell the story?
But I always wonder, why do you tell a story to police, right, during questioning that is probably not that hard to verify?
Right.
You're doing nothing but making yourself look bad.
Yeah.
Just don't say that part at all. Say something else that either is true or something that cannot be verified.
Yeah, exactly. But I get it, 19 years old, probably scared,
I don't know. He seemed kind of experienced. He'd been in trouble quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think he probably had quite a bit of experience talking to the cops, but it's different when a police officer is questioning you about the murder of an 11-year-old girl or just murder in general.
Yeah, but especially 11-year-old.
Police did get Rivera to submit to a polygraph, but it came back as inconclusive. They got him to take a second one, and This time, the polygraph showed that he was being deceptive.
I know we talk about polygraphs all the time, the weight behind them or not behind them today. So you just never know. But it's definitely going to be something that's going to spark the investigators' interest.
Yeah, no doubt. On October 27th, 1992, the investigators brought Rivera back in for questioning. And I think, Gibbs, right now, we have to take just a minute to give a little background on Juan Rivera. We mentioned it. At the time, he was 19 years old. He had dropped out of high school after completing the 9th grade. It was reported that Juan Rivera had a history of mental health issues. Investigators interrogated Rivera for 2 straight days. And during that time, Gibbs, I don't think he got a lot of rest. I don't think he got a lot of food. They were trying to wear him down.
Yeah, they worked him hard.
And they were really pushing him for a confession. And they finally did wear him down. On October 30th, around noon, investigators said that he was pulling clumps of his hair out of his head. He was banging his head against the wall in the interview room.
Yeah.
And then he finally broke down and told investigators that he did it. He killed Holly. So they arrested him. They put him in handcuffs and shackles. And they told him that they wanted him to make out a sworn statement with all of the details of the crime. And here's what Rivera said in his statement. On the morning of August 17th, 1992, he bought a couple of joints and a half gram of cocaine. He said he smoked one of the joints and then walked across town. He eventually came upon 442 Hickory and saw Holly out front. In his statement, he said that he started up a conversation with Holly, and the conversation was centered around his little sister. In his statement, Rivera pointed out that to him, Holly did not look 11 years old. She looked much older. But then he goes on to say that Holly told him she was lonely, and she asked him to come upstairs with her. He went on to say that when they got upstairs, he played with the 2 kids for a little while, and then the 2-year-old got tired. So Holly put her to bed, and she sent the boy outside to play. It was at this point that Rivera said he took his clothes off and started forcing himself on Holly. But he couldn't get an erection. And according to Rivera, Holly started making fun of him. Next, he says that the 2-year-old woke up and started to cry, so he went to check on her. And as he did, Holly grabbed his crotch and said, "Is this all you got?" and laughed at him. According to him, this made him mad, and he said Holly just kept going on and on about how small he was and that he couldn't get an erection. So he went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. When he came back into the room where Holly was, she saw the knife. She got scared. She tried to grab it. And this is when he started to cut and stab her, but she kept fighting and yelling. So Rivera said he kept stabbing. And once she stopped moving, he proceeded to sexually assault her. He said that after he ejaculated, he got up, washed his hands, and he washed the knife off, and then he ran out the back door. But he stopped outside, grabbed a mop, and banged the back door in to make it look as if someone had broken into the apartment. He claims in his statement that he wiped his prints off the mop handle and then tossed the knife in the yard and went home. Gibbs, we have to break down this statement. I'm flabbergasted.
That's a lot.
Well, it's a lot, and I could barely make it through it because there are so many things in here that to me seem just extremely unplausible. Number one, to think that an 11-year-old girl like Holly is going to invite this 19-year-old up for some kind of sexual tryst.
Right.
To me doesn't seem right. The fact that she's going to make fun of him
Yeah.
for his small package, the fact that he can't get an erection. It just
doesn't.
None of it makes sense.
No. Why would she entertain that? Why would she ever say anything? This is not what an 11-year-old girl would do.
No. Now, granted, there's exceptions to everything.
Right.
I just don't know. In 1992, I'm not sure many 11-year-old girls would have acted that way. I just don't see it. And today, I hope they're not acting like that today, but I'm even saying it's more implausible in 1992.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I just think it's BS.
Now, the issue of how this statement was generated, it would come back to haunt the prosecution again and again, because I think Gibbs, it was produced under, very heavy interrogation, and that's probably being euphemistic. They put some extreme stress onto Juan Rivera, and we talked about his reported mental issues. It was noted by a jail nurse in his file that Rivera had some mental issues. And like you've seen, I think, in some of the wrongful convictions, the fact that he had been placed in such a stress-filled environment, that he was interrogated for such a long time.
Yeah, 2 days with very little sleep or food.
Yeah, I think it's going to be thought by people down the road that Juan Rivera, at a certain point, was willing to do or say anything to get out from under that type of interrogation. People would claim that, he gave the statement he thought investigators wanted to hear, with the hopes that later it could all be cleared up, because none of the physical evidence would be able to tie him to any of these statements. And Gibbs, again, this is something that we're starting to learn, right? More and more about, that many of these confessions that have happened over the years, when it turns out that somebody was wrongfully convicted, yet they confessed, it was because they were put under such extreme stress, extreme circumstances, and they would have said anything.
Yeah, they're going to make these false statements just to get out, right? I want to get out of here. I want to go home. I want to not be here anymore.
Well, and the thinking used to be, and I was guilty of it myself, who in the hell would confess to a murder that they didn't commit? I've thought that for a long time, but my thinking has changed. I've seen too many convictions that have been conclusively overturned. There's no way that the person could have done it.
Right.
Yet they confessed to investigators in writing, on tape, on video, that they did it, and here's all the details.
Because it had to be them, because they're so mentally worn down, and everything that's being fed to them tells them that, well, it had to be you. And I think eventually their mind goes to that place where, you know what, it had to be me. Who else could have? It has to be me. So yes, I did it. And then they find out, no, you didn't do it.
And we've heard before that people have said, okay, I'm going to say this now because it's going to get me out.
Right.
But there's no way they're going to be able to convict me because the evidence is not going to line up. Well, magically, somehow the evidence is enough.
Yeah.
And it lines up enough with their story, and boom, they spend the next 20 years in jail.
Because sometimes a statement has a lot of weight behind it.
Well, because juries for a long time have thought the same way I did.
Yeah, why would he say that?
Why would somebody confess to a murder they didn't commit? But Gibbs, the investigators weren't happy with Rivera's confession. What they wanted him to do was refine his statement, add additional details, but they accomplished it by feeding some of the details to him, details that only the killer could have known. And I think it's important to point out, by this point, Rivera's in restraints because of his mental health concerns.
Sure.
He's also heavily medicated. Investigators took the statement he had made and they started to help him add to it. They had him correct some of the parts that they felt didn't accurately describe the events that occurred inside that apartment. And like I mentioned, they started feeding him details. They told him where to put some of the facts into the statement.
Yeah. Not something you would normally do.
It's not a good procedure to follow.
No.
It's going to come back to bite you in the ass.
Sure.
So by the end of this interrogation, Gibbs, what investigators had was a much better statement when it came to nailing Juan Rivera, right, to the wall for the murder of Holly. It was much more solid. And I think investigators, as well as the prosecution, felt that it would be enough to get him convicted.
Sure. You got the murderer telling you exactly what he did.
And providing details that had not been released to the public.
Sure.
Details that only the real killer should have known. Rivera was charged with first-degree murder based on his confession, even though they didn't have any physical evidence tying him to the murders. They didn't have any fingerprints putting him at the scene. On the day of the murder, Rivera was out on bond, and he was wearing an electric monitoring anklet, and that showed that he was nowhere near the scene.
And you think that alone should help his case, right?
You think it would be pretty powerful unless there was some type of evidence that he was able to get it off. He was able to put it on someone else. But
right.
I think they make those things pretty tough for a reason. But he was convicted in November 1993 and was sentenced to life in prison with no parole. Again, pretty much solely based on what would turn out later to be a coerced confession.
Yeah. And like you said, we now know there's a lot of false confessions out there.
And we didn't mention it when we were talking about it earlier, but many of them involve this same tactic, right? Police feeding information that the person that is giving the confession should know.
Right.
Because they later turn out not to be the killer. Well, how could they know? There's only one way. It's because they were fed that information by police.
Yeah, and they do it in a way that can be pretty straightforward or can be kind of where they dress it up a little bit. Fergie, when you were at that party and remember she had that red dress on and you took it off of her. Well, now you just found out she had a red dress on. It's in your mind. Now, when you write your statement, you're probably going to put red dress.
5 years later, in 1998, Rivera's conviction was overturned because of several mistakes that the judge had made, but they weren't going to let him go.
No. They have a statement from him saying he did it.
Yeah. So they retried him, and he once again, pretty quickly, was found guilty. This time, the 2-year-old girl, one of the children that Holly was babysitting for, obviously now she's older, she testified that she recalled seeing Juan Rivera at the apartment that night. So he was found guilty and again sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Well, they were able to put him in the apartment because of the then 2-year-old having memories of him being there, which is hard to, for me, it's hard to take.
Hard to take or hard to think that a 2-year-old would actually remember that?
Yeah, I think it'd be tough, as it for a 2-year-old to recall something like that.
Years later?
Yeah. Not saying that she didn't. I'm just saying I think it would be tough.
Yeah,
but you take that along with his statement.
Because this girl's still pretty young.
Yeah.
At the time she testified. No way would she be doing it out of malice or anything like that. No. But did she really remember? Did she just think that she remembered because maybe she had seen his face so many times on TV?
Or the investigators say, here.
Showed her a picture.
Remember him.
It's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
In 2004, Rivera's attorneys filed a motion to allow for DNA testing. By that time, testing procedures and methods had improved dramatically. So they wanted the vaginal swab tested against their client's DNA. The judge granted the motion, and the test proved that Juan Rivera was not the source of the DNA. So his conviction was vacated again. But again, they're not going to let him go. They retried him for a third time.
And this is where, to me, it gets a little crazy.
Well, they got to think of something, right? They have to figure out a way to combat this DNA evidence. Rivera's third trial began in April of 2009. And obviously, Gibbs, the prosecution was going to use his statements against him as they had in previous trials, but this time to combat the new DNA evidence. The prosecution said that it wasn't Rivera that sexually assaulted Holly. She had intercourse with someone else, in the days leading up to her death, or they theorized that Rivera could have had a friend with him who sexually assaulted her.
So they're just throwing wild guesses out there.
Well, they're throwing wild guesses, but they're also throwing the reputation of a murdered 11-year-old girl under the bus.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely they are.
They are making a statement that this girl was not only sexually active, but had slept with someone in the days leading up to her death.
Yeah.
As a parent, I don't know. I'm not taking that very well if I'm sitting, in the courtroom.
I mean, if they're saying, we just need to do this to get the conviction.
And I'm sure that they probably did tell the parents something like that. Holly's twin sister took the stand and told the jury that her sister was not sexually active. Heather also told the jury that at the age of 8, she and Holly were forced to perform oral sex on their brother's friend. That's really brutal, Gibbs, and had to have been extremely tough for her to admit in open court.
Yeah, nothing that anybody would ever want to say, but had to.
But Gibbs, on May 8th, 2009, a jury once again found Rivera guilty, and he received life in prison with no parole.
Never ending for this guy.
No, it's never ending. And I think when you look at the research, the prosecution weighed so heavily on his detailed confession. And I think in every trial, no matter what new things came to light, no matter what the defense put up, the jury put a lot of weight behind Rivera's confession.
And they had to put a lot of weight onto it because the defense was able to show the DNA was not his.
But it's not over. Rivera's team continued to appeal, and eventually an appellate court, after hearing the case, they made several conclusions and ultimately overturned his conviction for a third time in December of 2011. And the judge cited the confession, saying it shouldn't be valid. It was coerced. He cited malice. He used the word malice. It showed malice by the investigators. And the judge criticized heavily the way that the prosecution handled the DNA. During that third trial, they knew that the DNA was not Rivera's. And instead of saying, okay, could this be from the real killer? They chose to take the route of saying that this 11-year-old girl had been sexually active. She hadn't been.
No.
As the judge pointed out, at 8 years old, she was subjected to child abuse, forced to perform a sexual act. That doesn't make someone sexually active.
No.
Gibbs, something else really big came up in this appeal. Apparently, a police officer who had worked this case back when Holly was murdered had gone to the defense team, and for whatever reason, he wanted to clear his conscience. Maybe he told them that a second knife had been found at the crime scene. Apparently it was found in some bushes. The appellate court also did something kind of amazing. They took the additional step of barring prosecutors from ever retrying Juan Rivera for this murder.
Well, after 3 tries, I think it's time to put it to rest.
Well, and I think it was probably kind of a moot point anyway. His confession was never going to be allowed in another trial.
Right.
And without that, prosecutors had nothing anyway.
Yeah, no DNA, no that. So,
but who knows? It probably wouldn't have stopped them from trying.
yeah.
In 2012, Holly's sister Heather, who was 31 at the time, attempted to rob a cigarette shop. She was unsuccessful. She got overpowered and held by the clerk until police arrived on the scene. Her bail was set at $50,000. There really wasn't a whole lot of information out there about it. The police didn't relay too much in the way of details about the case to the press because I think, Gibbs, they felt the family had already been through so much over the years.
I think it just shows that how this crime back then has changed Heather moving forward through her life, the impact that it probably had on her life, losing her sister to such a horrible crime that it just threw her life off. Because her parents told the Daily Herald that she's been struggling ever since she lost her sister. And she got into some substance abuse, and that just led to some issues with the law over time.
Yeah, no doubt it affected her in a negative way. You're never going to have a positive effect from losing a sibling. And it sounds like she wasn't able to cope with that loss. And she will probably always struggle.
Yeah, like you said, it's one thing to lose a sibling, but to be the twin of a sibling.
And the one thing I don't know, Gibbs, is, did she get counseling? How much counseling did she go through to help her work through some of these issues?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that. But Juan Rivera served 20 years in prison. And eventually he filed a federal civil rights case against officials of the city of Waukegan and Lake County for wrongful conviction. He received a $20 million settlement. Okay, $20 million is a lot of money.
Sure.
And I think you and I have had this argument before. Nobody can tell me $20 million is not a lot of money. How many people, though, will say, I would give up 20 years of my life if I knew after the 20 years I would get $20 million?
And not only give up 20 years of your life, 20 years of your prime life, right? I mean, this is from age 19 to 39.
Well, sure.
That's a big chunk of your...
I don't care if it was 39 to 59.
Well, that's true.
I'm not giving none of it up.
Yeah, not for 20 million.
I don't care if it's 5 to 25.
Yeah.
Now, there's some of those awkward teenage years that I might give up. But
yeah. If you could pick and choose, chunk them out.
For a few $1 million.
Yeah.
13 was a little rough for me, but...
This is no way, man. 20 million? No.
I mean, I am glad that these individuals get compensated.
Sure.
And that's a pretty good number.
Yes.
That works out to be $1 million a year. There are people that have been wrongfully convicted and incarcerated for long periods of time that I know for a fact didn't get anywhere near that.
Right.
And the number was much lower, less than $100,000 a year.
I mean, granted, they were probably just happy to be out, but
I
still,
think
they should be compensated.
Yeah. The problem is we've gone through all of this and we're back to the original question, which is who murdered Holly Staker?
Yeah.
And I think this is what you see in a lot of these cases where it's determined there's a wrongful conviction. The police put so much time and effort into Juan Rivera. You can't tell me that that was not to the exclusion of looking at or devoting resources towards looking at someone else.
Yeah. Once they got that tunnel vision, unfortunately, they're not doing what they really need to do.
The one thing that this case has going for it is very tangible DNA evidence. So obviously there's been no match to date, but there is a good chance that this case will one day be solved.
Yeah. I mean, you have that DNA samples out there that, as you've seen in so many of the unsolved cases that you have done just on criminology, they find these guys. Just a matter of time.
And the technology gets better all the time.
Right.
Now, I will say this. I think there are people that, through it all, still believe that Juan Rivera was involved in Holly's murder. That might be a minority. Now, at this point, I think the majority of people believe that he was coerced. He was fed information that resulted in this confession that was used in multiple trials. And because the police focused so much of their attention on Rivera, they let the real killer get away.
Yeah.
But that's it, Gibbs. That's the case of the unsolved murder of Holly Staker. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. It's Sierra calling from Ontario. I was just listening to your Kristen Monastery episode, and you guys were talking about the gas spectrometry with the mass spec, and I just wanted to comment on that. It's really cool. I'm actually a PhD candidate over here in biology, and my colleagues are currently working on that exact project right now, and they're trying to investigate how the compounds given off by decaying bodies can be detected in very minuscule amounts by just kind of capturing the air around the body and then analyzing it after. It's a really cool thing. I really like your show. I've been listening to it for the last little while, and I'm fully caught up, so I can't wait to hear more episodes from you. Thanks. Bye.
All right. So first of all, she's really smart.
Yeah, I can tell.
Way smarter than probably both you and I put together.
That's not hard to achieve.
It's not setting the bar all that high,
Right.
I'll be honest with you, but really cool work that she's involved with.
Technology, man.
I know. I mean, you're talking about things that, in the future are going to solve crimes that today we can't even really fathom.
I'm lucky.
Air. They're going to analyze the air, and then they're going to know who the murderer was.
I'm lucky to sniff out dinner,
I don't think you have much problem sniffing out dinner.
That's
usually.
true. I find it.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Jordan from the Buffalo area of New York. I just listened to the Crystal and Gerard case. So glad that you did a local case. I've called in before to kind of get you guys to maybe do a Buffalo case. Still the bike path rapist, Altinio Sanchez. Haven't really heard anything on any other podcasts about it. So, I don't know how much is out there. The other thing, I kind of have a beef with y'all. So I just became a Patreon supporter, and you messed up my last name. It was pretty entertaining, but there's an L in there. So I want you guys to figure that out by my first name and try to put the L in where it belongs. But thanks for what you guys do. You're awesome. You're super entertaining, and keep your own time ticking. Thanks.
Shocking that we would mess somebody's name up.
I'm surprised.
I am not.
It's a rarity.
I apologize, but we do mess up a lot of people's names.
It happens, Jordan.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Ashley from Montana, long-time listener, second-time caller. I left a message, I think, about 6 months ago in regards to Zach Ramsey, and I know it's been a couple weeks since you guys did that episode, but I just wanted to call and thank you so much for doing that. You gave him a lot of justice, and I just appreciate you covering a small town like Great Falls, Montana, and it really meant a lot to me to hear that. So I appreciate you guys, and you guys do a phenomenal job. So keep up the good work and keep your own time ticking. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate that. It means
Yeah.
a lot to us.
I'm glad you liked it.
And I know you researched that case, Gibbs, and I thought it was very well researched. I thought that was a fascinating case because of the big time killer tie-in.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, Gibbs, you and I look for cases, big, small, big city, small city, different states, international. I mean, we're trying to find cases that haven't received as much coverage. We're all over the map.
And we got great listeners that send suggestions in all the time.
Exactly.
So we appreciate all that.
Hey guys, this is Terry from Louisville calling. I was listening to your presentation on Martha Moxley, which I think you did a great job. I think you guys always do a great job. And there's a case that I remember from when I was in high school because I'm old, and it just never left me. It's the case of the murder of Maria Marshall in New Jersey. She was murdered by her husband, Robert Marshall, but there's a lot to it. There was a movie made about it. She seemed like such a good woman, and there's so much to it. I just wondered if you all had come across that case. I think it would be a great case to cover. Anyway, keep your own time ticking, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Now, I can say, Gibbs, that is not one that I'm familiar with, but we will definitely look into it.
Get it on our list.
Yep. All right, buddy. That is it.
Yeah.
For another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.